Are you still building WordPress sites with page builders to save time? Does it really save you any time? If you're like me and you're technically proficient enough to build a website from the ground up, now that we have AI at our disposal, it makes less and less sense to bother with page builders. But can you actually design and build a quality website that looks good and is optimized to rank with AI? Yes, you can, but not with one of those React-based website platforms like Framer. Those are cursed with bad optimization and are never going to perform like a good old-fashioned WordPress website would. Hi, I'm Nate. I'm a 20-year digital marketer, consultant, and agency owner. I've built hundreds of websites myself from the .com era to now, and I've seen pretty much everything. On this channel, I talk about AI, marketing, and automation, the keys, as I see it, to success in growing your business in 2025 and beyond. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use AI, specifically Codex and Cursor's new model Composer, to build amazing-looking websites fast and error-free so you can ditch those clunky, bloated page builders and enjoy designing websites again. So here's my system at a glance. First, I create a mockup of the homepage on my whiteboard, detailing all the behaviors, animations, etc. as notes. Then I take a picture of that and drop it into Cursor Chat with Codex running as an extension. And I describe the mockup section by section down to all of the very smallest details. I describe any behaviors like animations, hover states, and so on. And I provide very clear instructions on how to structure the design to ensure that search optimization is taken into account. That's not necessarily something that AI does particularly well right out of the gate. That's something that you're going to want to know well yourself and be able to instruct it on. So I put all of this together in a very long prompt, identifying all the fonts I want to use, all the instructions, detailing all of the section one at a time, down from the top of the page. So I take everything that I've pulled together, the fonts, the colors, the list of images, all of the instructions, the details on section by section from top to bottom. I put that into a big massive prompt. It's usually a couple of pages long. And I will then ask the model, in this case Codex, to read it, assess it, research whatever it needs to, and present a plan before it starts building. And this is super important because if you don't ask it to plan first, it will often just kind of jump straight into building the first thing without absorbing all of the context. So if you force it to go through the entire process, we'll call it mentally, to think its way through, reason its way through that process, then show you that plan. You can read through the plan and make sure that it got everything correct. If you just skip that step, assuming that it's going to get to the same place anyway, it actually doesn't. It will potentially drift more if it doesn't have that plan. So take that opportunity to do a planning prompt. Just tell it to present a plan to accomplish the following task, give it the task, and say, as a reminder at the end, don't code, don't build anything yet, wait for explicit approval before you start. And then it will give you a plan that you can read through, and you can just say something like, this plan is approved, and then you can go. Once that's ready, once the plan is approved, I just give it the explicit direction to start building, and it switches into that build mode. And then Codex will just spin on that and keep building until it's completed. Sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes, and sometimes it's several hours. Typically, when I'm building out one of these individual pages, it's pretty brief. It's maybe 15 or 20 minutes based on the complexity of the page. And then the code is ready. So when the home page is built as an index.html file with CSS and some JavaScript, I then ask Codex to follow up and convert the design into a skeleton WordPress theme using all of the basic default files that you would expect, like the style.css, header.php, footer.php, blog.php, and so on. All of those files can be based on the design of the homepage. Now, you're actually going to have to go in and fill out all of the details of those later on, but it can give you a skeleton to start with, reusing the header and the footer and putting all of the reusable pieces into partials and things like that. Likewise, when you're converting the HTML file into a WordPress theme, you're going to want to have a planning step. So just think every time you're doing something new, you're going to give it that planning instruction. And for a little aside, I like to use Codex when I'm doing the initial build because it can run for longer periods of time and do more complex tasks without having to be re-prompted. And then editing it, like I'll talk about in a second, I switched to Composer now. And I used to use Claude Code and Sonnet 4.5 for this, but I find that Composer is actually better. It's faster and it's often more accurate when it relates to code. So then once I've got my skeleton theme, the rest of the steps are simply building out the individual page templates, like you have an about page and a contact page and all these other things. So you'll add a new page template, which is something defined in WordPress. But basically, it's just like any other WordPress theme file, except it is designated to be selected off of a list when you make a new page. In WordPress, on the right side, admin panel where all of your post settings are, like the schedule for posting and the category that it's in and the excerpt and all of that. Right over there, there's a little option that says template, and you can then just pick which of the template files. So if you make your contact page and go pick your contact page template off of that list and save it, poof, now it appears as the contact page with your HTML and CSS rendered into the WordPress theme. If you're building this out in pure HTML and CSS, that doesn't necessarily give you an option to edit it inside of the WordPress editor. So if you want to do that, you'll have to take a few other steps. You'll have to code the individual pieces of the design that you want as Gutenberg blocks or as a plugin with short codes and things like that. And I do that whenever there's some reusable component that I want to be able to edit the text in the WordPress editor. It's easy to do, but it's like a little mini step. You have to create a new project, build a plugin, and then import the plugin into the current theme that you're working on, which is well worth it if you have that kind of editing to do. But a lot of the times, if you think about how page builders work, you basically have to go in and hand manually edit each of those pages if you want to update something anyway. So I kind of figure that since I have AI to code with, I'm not really saving any time building into WordPress that way. So I think of the static website that, your services pages, your homepage and things like that. I often will just leave them in HTML and CSS inside of WordPress so that I'm not editing them in WordPress, I'm editing them in the code, right? But if something does need to be editable, either by a client of mine or something like that, then I'll just wrap that into either theme options, something that appears in your either settings inside WordPress admin, or I'll make a special plugin for it, and then I can use it as a shortcode in the WordPress editor, and that solves all of those problems. But a lot of the time, you don't actually need to do that, and you're not going to be changing the basic structure of your page. So you can just leave that in the HTML embedded in the PHP files, and you're good to go. So after I have then built all of the page templates for my about page, for my contact page, and so on, and we built out the default theme templates, such as your blog, your single post, your single page, your 404 page, your search page, so on. All of those pages, all those templates need to be created as well. But you can, once you've built the design in the home page, that design is going to extend to the rest of the pages structurally and with the fonts and the basic stylings and so forth. All of that is more or less going to be handled when you're doing your homepage. So your homepage, your individual pages, you kind of add to the styles as you need to as you go along. And you leave all of that in styles.css. Use one styles.css, flood it into a bunch of files for downloading it easier. Use one themes.js so that you don't have script files everywhere. And because you're building this yourself and you're writing most of the code using AI, the code is cheap, and you don't have to then have dozens of plugins to have all this functionality. If you need something and it's simple, I suggest you just build it and include it in the theme or in a plugin that you build. And this gives you the best of both worlds. You have a very fast, very lightweight website that doesn't have a bunch of dependencies. Something's not going to break because someone issues like a theme update or a plugin update or something. It's all under your control. And if you need to be able to edit something that you've built in, you can make a special tool for it. Again, because code is very cheap. It's worth talking about Composer specifically in this process because while Codex is amazing at the initial build out, it is a bit slow. It thinks a lot. It's very laborious. And so you end up waiting a long time. If you're doing little iterations, that's not very efficient. You'll end up taking as long to do it with AI as you would manually. But if you're using Composer, which is just blindingly fast, then you can make those little changes almost in the time that it takes you to come up with the next thing that you want to do. So I'll fire off a change, have it be coding, and I'll switch the screen back over to the website. I'll review it a little bit more and figure out what I want to edit next. And by the time I switch back to Composer, it's done. I can accept those changes, confirm that they are what I wanted, and then just start typing the next thing. So that back and forth rhythm is really good for iteration, and Composer is by far the fastest model that I've ever used for coding. I don't know that I would use it for solving major problems. It seems to struggle when there are, technical issues that are a little bit more difficult to overcome. Codex is far better for problem solving like that. And I'm still not quite comfortable enough to use it refactoring my code base or something like that. Codex is exemplary for all of those kind of tasks. But for the quick iterative changes, it's really nice to have Composer as a backup. And managing this is fairly simple if you use Git. So one of the biggest problems with AI and development is that it will occasionally go off the rails and do something you don't want it to do. To prevent this, to protect yourself from it, just use a Git repository that's private for your own website. So if we get a couple of iterations into some change and decide, ugh, I really don't like this, I don't like where this is going, or it went off the rails and did something wrong, I can just roll back immediately. Even if I'm past the point where I've accepted the changes and I suddenly come to my senses, it's easy to use Git to roll that back. And you can just use the agent to do so. You can just tell it, roll me back to the last commit that didn't have this problem in it, and it'll more often than not figure that out and handle it for you. So you don't have to be great with your Git commands. Just whenever you finish a new feature, just stage commit and push using the agent, and it'll take care of it automatically. And then, of course, it's very simple when you want to deploy the site using Git. You can just install Git on your production server and pull it down. That's all you need to do. So all of this comes together pretty quickly after the initial design is worked out on the homepage, and the site is then converted into a WordPress theme. Adding a new page template usually takes me maybe a couple of hours. First to design the whiteboard, then to have Codex build it, and then tweaking with Composer until it's perfect. And I don't always know exactly what I want it to look like. It takes a lot less time the more that I have that image in my head and I can design with the AI to that image. But if I need to do some back and forth, some experimentation, Composer's really great at that, but it does drag out the time a little bit. So that's why I say it takes a couple of hours. I think if you one-shot it and you got it right in your initial description, it could take, 20 minutes. But most of the time, you're going to imagine something a little bit differently than how it actually plays out on the screen. You're going to need to do some tweaking. The catch here, of course, is that you actually have to know how to build a website from scratch. None of those things that are included in the page builders, like basic understandings of how to optimize a page for SEO, or whether or not it should have schema and what type of schema, and how you minimize your JavaScript files, all of that stuff. None of that is covered when you're building it from scratch, obviously. So you have to know how to build an optimized site. You have to know what schema data is relevant. You have to know how to internally link correctly and what is and isn't indexable by Google. And that's a lot. So if you're not a technical guy like me, this probably isn't a full solution for you. But I think it does show you where we're going and how fast we're going to get there. I wasn't able to build like this even 4 months ago. So the rate of AI progress is setting a blistering pace for us. I think it also means that you should be more demanding of your website design hires. It's not enough to use a page builder anymore with all of their downsides, when fast, functional websites can be built end to end and still be updated when needed via WP admin. You should work with someone who knows their stuff and is going to be able to build you a fast, secure, responsive, and beautiful website with AI, rather than with a series of bloated tools and a stack of plugins. There are a lot of businesses that are still opting for Wix, Webflow, and Squarespace because they're cheap, they're manageable, and they're fairly uncomplicated. And that's simply because they don't realize that you can have all of those things with WordPress without having 17 different paid plugin subscriptions or being locked in with one agency. That's just what the web design world has sold us on over the last 10 years. AI development solves all of these problems. So I suggest that it's time that we switch our thinking from what do I have to compromise on to make my website manageable to what would make my website wickedly effective at converting.